Here is this week's theme song. It's award-winning already. Please subscribe if our podcast is gonna survive. We make it oh so good, but not many people watch it yet, listen yet, but they should. The Showrunner Show.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe my worst.
No, not even close to your worst.
Not even close. Welcome to the Showrunner Show, where every week we demystify some aspect of the job of showrunning for anyone who works in TV, who wants to work in TV, or who just wants to know how it's all made. I'm Stacey Shabosky.
And I'm John Eric Dowdle. We're happy you're here.
Yeah, it's just us this week. It's kind of crazy. We usually have Drew and a guest, but now it's just us. And we're married, so we can just do things like talk about the grocery list or childcare, right? You guys won't mind if we just slip into that, will you?
Yeah, this week we're talking about working through your own internal resistance. Let's say you have a script due or an outline and you're having a hard time focusing on it. I like to say, the nice thing about working in TV is there's just no time for resistance. There's no time for perfectionism. There's no time for any of that. You just have to get it done. And that can be really daunting, really hard. And especially before doing this, before doing TV, like it would take me a year to write a script, or like I'd spend all this time lovingly crafting each scene. And I was always worried, like, oh, when TV is moving that fast, how do you know you'll get it done? Like, how can you work at that speed? And I think the only way
is so different.
It's so different. And there's a Steve Martin quote. Writer's block is a fancy term made up by whiners so they can have an excuse to drink alcohol. Like, I love that. I love that. I feel like when doing feature scripts, or for the novice, there's this idea of like writer's block. I'm blocked on the script. And in television, you're on a moving train and you got to keep moving. Even if
there's another great quote. That novelist, what's the thing about it's the famous one about I only write when inspiration hits. Fortunately, inspiration hits every morning at 9 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know that one?
Yeah,
I love that one too.
Yeah. But, I guess first let's start by talking about what resistance is, what it is. And then, some strategies we've used to get beyond that. So I'd say what it is fear, essentially,
Perfectionism,
so much of
fear.
Yeah. And really perfectionism is, I think, a version of fear too. Like, it's if I can't get it perfect, I can't do it. And, the fear that you're going to get it wrong, the fear that you're, don't understand the scene or the character, or that you're going to get rewritten, or that the studio or network won't like it. I think all those things, or, sometimes it's just burnout too. Sometimes you're exhausted.
I experience this feeling a lot as like just a discomfort in my body. That's how so I'm not sitting there going, I'm so scared, I'm going to be rewritten. That's probably what I'm feeling deep down. But how it shows up is my chair doesn't feel good. My desk doesn't feel good. None of it feels right. And then when I sit down, I can't focus. I just find myself easily distracted. I'm not having fun,
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting. Steve pointed this out, my brother pointed this out in a helpful way of when you're an amateur, you kind of do things because it's fun and you're doing it right when it feels good. I just had this, even though I wanted to work on this pitch I'm developing that I've been working on forever, and that's the thing I'm supposed to do. Yesterday, I was struck by this new idea and I just sat down and for hours, it just flew out of me. Full scenes, like I meant to make notes about we could do this or that. Instead, it came out as full scenes and it felt so good. It physically felt good. And not only was it easy not to pick up the phone or do anything like that. In fact, I actually ignored the sweet potatoes in the oven and I just kept going with the flow. That is a delightful feeling. And if you're an amateur, you can let that be your guide the whole time. If you're a professional, you cannot wait for it to feel good. You have to just meet the deadline. Does that make sense? Just because it feels tedious or difficult or not super fun doesn't mean you're not doing it right. In fact, if you're a pro, you probably are doing it right if there's a little burnout. And sorry, I'm completely in the flow of this. I was saying that when I have resistance, it just feels gross. Like I'm just like, ugh, the chair, my lumbar support, I hate it. The opposite is true too. When there's a deadline, like an actual deadline of a real show you're working on, not just a spec that you're working on where you have an internal deadline with your writing partner, not just a pitch where you're like, it'll be done when it's done, but an actual show that you're working on with an actual deadline, like, hey, we're shooting this scene tomorrow. Can you finish the rewrite on it? When you've got that, I found that I did on Joe Pickett, because so much of it is set in nature. I found myself often with my laptop sitting on a stump by a creek, just typing away. Could not be. It was so physically uncomfortable, but I didn't feel the discomfort. Does that make sense?
Yeah. On set.
When I'm on set, I'm sitting on a stump. Bugs are biting me, but the scene has to be turned in immediately, so I don't notice any of that at all. I just feel fine.
Yeah, the
oh my
adrenaline
God, I just talked so much.
No, it's great. The adrenaline can sometimes, help you pick up the slack, on some of that. And sometimes, I remember I worked with an actor a long time ago who had this I basically just play myself. So, I don't have to he didn't, study acting, didn't, and this was, back in our really amateur days, this isn't anyone you'd know or anything. But he had this I don't need acting. I just kind of play versions of myself and it's fine. But then there was one day where that guy was going through something emotional in his own life and he didn't feel like the version of himself that he wanted to play, and he had built no craft to get beyond that. I was like, oh, this is why you have to build craft. I remember at the time having that this is why you build craft, is so you have a system of tools to fall back on when you're not feeling it. When you're I used to write and I'd be crying and having, laughing and crying and having all the big feelings. And now half the time when I write, I'm writing and, it's okay, this is, I love it. It's, it's my job and I love writing. But
it doesn't always get you high. You know what I mean?
It doesn't always get you high.
It's super fun when it gets you high, but I think the more you do it for real, the more you actually do it, the less often you get high.
Yeah, well, and sometimes it's okay, I got to write a shootout scene and I don't know, don't know what to do with it. I don't feel like doing that right now. I got to say, there's still no feeling better than working on the script you're not supposed to be working on.
It's so true.
It's like everyone's waiting on me, but I'm working on this thing, my passion project.
100%.
It goes back to I feel like in my 20s, so often it's I should be looking for a job, but I'm writing and it feels so good because it's so it's like an act of subversion or
true.
Something you're not supposed to be doing, and that
would be I'm supposed to be turning around draft number 8 billion of the final scene of Act 4 of Episode 3, but what I'm really doing is working on my novel.
Yeah, totally, and it's so fun.
Yeah, I agree.
But there has to be a system, especially if you're showrunning, especially because as showrunning, your competence as a showrunner is judged almost as much on delivering scripts on time as it is on quality of scripts.
Yeah, wow.
That's harrowing. Not only do you have to get through your own resistance and get your, scripts and rewrites done, but you have to also help your writers, get through their resistance and get their scripts done on time. And
well, that's probably a two-parter, right? To get scripts on time, the showrunner's not writing every script. So part of it would be delegating correctly, right? So that your writers know to keep chugging along. And then the other part, a big part, is that a lot of times the showrunner, they're always going to be the final one allowed to look at the script. And a lot of times they do. They are the final pass. Sometimes they rewrite a lot of scenes. Do you know what I mean? Obviously people in the business would know that, but maybe a first-time listener might not realize that just because basically many different writers write the episodes, but the showrunner always has the prerogative to do a final pass of them. So take and go, great, you did a wonderful job. Now I'm just going to shorten this scene and add this joke, do, do, do. And they might not always do it, but usually they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually they do. And, and as a showrunner, like, you'll get scripts that need a lot of work and that, at moments, it's like a miracle sometimes when they show up and you're like, oh, I can hand this in without, doing much of anything. And so often it's, so often the other writers they're trying to mimic the voice of the show, which is, if you're a showrunner, it's probably your voice. And it's not easy to write as someone else. And so, that you would be just as hard writing in their voice as it is for them to write in your voice. And so that's just part of it. That's part of it. Part of it is you're going to get scripts that don't sound like the show or that don't feel like the show, or I've seen, moments where I'll say, I'll start with like one of the, unhealthy ways of overcoming resistance is by like drinking or getting stoned or, sometimes writers use that as a way of getting past their resistance. And I've, been delivered scripts, from, higher level people where you're like, oh my God, what is this? Like, I don't understand what happened here. And then to realize later, like, oh, I think this is a way of getting, they're using this as a way of getting through their resistance.
I want to be clear about when I was talking about getting high earlier when writing. I meant high on dopamine. I didn't mean
Oh yeah. Oh no, of
smoke
course,
a bowl and then sit down and write a bunch of crap. I meant, and probably people realize that, but when I was talking about like, oh, you're writing and you're feeling high, I meant dopamine.
Of course. And, I'll speak for myself. Like I know in my 20s, early on in writing, I would regularly like use alcohol, use weed, like to help like loosen me up to write. And my scripts were never all that good. And then I got to a point where I was like, honestly, just spending too much time on my own in altered states. And it really was having a horrible impact on my life. And I had to get to the place where I was like, okay, well, even if I can never write again, I have to stop doing this. And I got sober and suddenly my scripts got coherent and good. And, and I developed craft and that was a life-changing realization for me. I had this real limiting belief on that front. And as an adult and as a pro, like, I have a whole bunch of little tricks and tools. One of my favorite is my sand timer. I have a 20-minute sand timer. I can do anything for 20 minutes and I'll flip my sand timer and I'll give myself 20 minutes of reading this next script or writing this writing this scene. And often by the time that 20 minutes is over, I have a flow on or I've at least taken a big bite out of it. And then maybe I'll tell myself like after this 20 minutes, I'll take a walk or I'll do something, nice and relaxing or, do a Wordle or whatever, have a tea.
If I've really got a deadline, I'll do the same thing with a timer. I use my phone and I set a 30-minute timer, although that's dangerous, right? Because you've got your phone, which is the ultimate black hole to suck you in away from your work. So I get why a sand timer is better, but I'll set my alarm for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or 20 minutes, and I'll set it aside. And then when it rings, I'll do jumping jacks or I'll pee or I'll get a water. I'll do something where I physically move around. Now that's if I really have, like a big deadline, or if I'm out on outline, but I'm eager to get back to the room. So that's one thing. A lot of times, speaking of showrunners, they're kind of on all the scripts all the time, but the writers who are actually in the room, they often get to leave the room like, hey, you're out on outline, don't show up until your outline's done. And it's different for every room and it's communicated differently. But sometimes people are allowed to leave. I mean, I think I've been on stuff where people left the room for like 10 days for an outline or something insane. I like the room. I love talking. I hate the idea that if I'm gone for 10 days, oh my God, that's 10 days that I've had nothing to do with the show. I'm going to come back and be like, wait, what? What are we doing? I like the room. So when I go out on outline, I'm trying to blast it out as quickly as possible so I can get back in the room. And I'm not one of those heroes who can be like, well, I'll just stay up till 3 a.m. I don't stay up till 3 a.m. It's not, I'm old. I'm not going to do it. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
going to have a normal banker's hours. So I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about anymore. But the inspiration of like, you set your timer, you crank it out, you take a sip of water, you do some jumping jacks, and you get right back into it so you can finish whatever you're working on as quickly as possible so you can get back to the room.
I think that's great. And, I have to say too, like the idea of like, on set directors say, you don't win your morning, you don't lose your day, at the end of the day, you lose your day in the morning, when you have all the time in the world. And I think the same is true with outlines and scripts. Like if you have 10 days to write an outline or, 2 weeks to write a script or something, and you spend the first week and a half of that or the first, 7 days of that just like goofing around, then suddenly it's like trying to write, like, I mean, here's a funny story, like trying to write under the stress, I feel like the best writing happens with ease, not with like, oh my God, I have to get this done today or I'm dead, like that. Adding that extra layer of fear or stress can be really hard to just focus through. Where we, on the movie Devil that I directed years ago, we were rewriting, we were redoing a section at the start. And so we had to do a rewrite on this opening scene, but nobody could agree on what the scene should be. And so it was like me in a room writing, and we had an entire crew sitting in the hall waiting to go on a location scout. And I'd write a version of the scene, and then the studio didn't like it. So then I wrote a different version of the scene, and then M. Night Shyamalan didn't like it. He was producing. And I had like 50 people sitting in the hall waiting, their buses outside waiting.
Oof.
And they needed me to write this. And I just freaked out. Like I was just like in this, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what they want from me. And I actually called Stacy's brother, Steve Shabosky. And I was like, Steve, I don't know what to do. There's 50 people sitting in the hallway and nobody likes what I'm doing. And he's like, okay, just slow down. And just like talking to him, he's like, oh, that's the worst. Like, when, it gets, down to the wire like that. And he just sort of helped me slow down a little bit. And we talked through the scene. I tried a third thing and it went through okay. But yeah, there are those moments. I'll say that's another strategy is talk to someone you trust. Like all kinds of times, like I'm stuck on a scene and I'll talk to Stacy, I'll talk to Drew, I'll talk to Nelson or, an actor or like, and just talk through a scene because so many, what you don't have time to, I don't know, to ruminate over like you would on a feature script in TV, like part of the counterbalance to the speed you need to deliver things in is a room full of people working on it with you.
Yes. Yeah.
So bringing things back to the room, bringing things to the showrunner or and just saying like, I'm stuck on the scene. I don't know how to get into the scene. And like often, talking a scene through with Stacy for 5 minutes will save me hours.
Oh, thanks.
And will help, oftentimes like I'm going into the scene the wrong way and I feel that, but I can't quite articulate it. And Stace will be able to be analytical and be like, oh, this is the problem and diagnose something. I
do love analyzing.
Yeah. And so I'll say, sand timers, gamifying, your workload, talking with, the people you work with.
What about MIQ? I want to talk about MIQ for a sec. I used to love that one. So MIQ, your most important question. Now, this is something you do more at the early stages when you got the full room and you're probably not shooting yet. This is all pre-production. I guess you could do it in production, but your room has probably disbanded by then. But sometimes whoever was running the room, whether it was you or Lauren and Andy or Nelson, whoever's running it, would give us like they would give us a challenge or a question for the next day. Like, how are we going to introduce this character? Or what should the big climactic fight be? Or whatever. Or, hey, there's a clue that we've got to get out. What, because we do thrillers and stuff. There's this clue we've got to get out. What's the best way to do it? Or what's the
Hmm.
best way to do it in a way that features these particular actors? Whatever.
Yeah.
And then what I like to do is, so that's the question, and you're supposed to bring it in the next day, like homework. And I'm very gold star student, so I get super irritated when we do it and we bring it in, and then whoever's running the room doesn't ask for it. I'll be like, excuse me, you wanted to know how we're going to resolve that clue, and I worked on it all night. So what I like to do is I make it the MIQ, the most important question. And before I go to sleep, I just tell myself, like, hey, when you're asleep, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just come up with a cool way to land that character or solve that clue, or if you could just come up with like a cool idea for that, that would be great. Okay, good night. And then I'll go to sleep, and I don't actively think about it. It's not like I lay there, because if I actively thought about it, then I would probably have trouble falling asleep. So I just like give it up to my subconscious. I go to sleep, and honest to God, more than half the time, it's not foolproof, but more than half the time I wake up, or I'll even wake up at like 4 a.m, like, got a voice memo of this, and I'll have it. I'll at least have something, you know? And that is just the most delightful feeling, when your subconscious does all the work and you get all the reward.
Yeah. And yeah, to trust your unconscious mind, and to trust and that's part of the benefit of having time. If you start working on your script right away, when, instead of waiting till the last moment, like, but if you start like picking away at it.
Yeah, because you're writing an
th-
outline in January. You're blue skying something in December that you're going to outline in January that they're going to be shooting in July or June.
yeah.
Not always. I think some shows that I bet network shows that have, I think, 4 billion episodes per season. I'm sure they're writing and shooting as they go. But anyway,
Yeah.
there can be a lot of time.
Or sometimes the writer's room breaks down, and you know what I mean? And, or whatever, for whatever reason, it gets right up to the wire where they're delivering scripts like the day before people are,
Yeah.
shooting. And that sounds horrible. Like we try very hard to stay way ahead of it so that there's time to have conversations and to fix things, where it's not like all down to the wire. Cause that just, creates that level of stress, which makes it hard to work through. It's hard to play, it's hard to play violin while the Titanic's sinking,
Yeah.
like that is not an easy thing to do.
There's got to be like that sweet spot, right? Where your deadlines inspire you and motivate you. But if you get too close to that deadline, or you have too many of those, it's one thing if you have to write a cool half-page scene with a great speech, and that's all you've got to rewrite. It's another thing if you've got a deadline and you've got like 8 of those, and you don't know how episode 10 is going to end. You don't even know what characters are going to be in it. That's a different kind of. So how it's a fine line. You want your deadlines to motivate and inspire you, but not have so many that you feel like throwing up from stress.
That's well said.
Getting up early is a good technique.
Yeah. Getting up early. I got to say, working out at noon, like I find like if I get up early and I, work all morning and then I do a workout at noon, I almost feel like I'm waking up all over again. I'm fresh all over again for the second half of the day. And if I don't do that, I have, 3-4 good hours in the morning, and then I sort of peter out.
Right.
But if I'm
And
willing
like
to do a
returning
workout,
emails.
yeah. And so, I mean, that can be a great way. Like, sometimes resistance comes from not being clear what the scene should be. And in those circumstances, often it's really helpful to talk it through, and, just keeping mindful of like done is better than perfect. Getting it done is better than getting it perfect. And no matter what, there's going to be more rewrites. There's going to be more shots at it. I remember our first show that Drew and I were just like running on our own. Like we'd work on the script, give it to each other, do rewrites, give it back. Like we created like 5 extra drafts on like every draft just by going back and forth, trying to get every script perfect along the way. And season 2, we sort of trusted the process more and would just be very specific about when we took our licks at it. And it was a fraction of the amount of work, and the scripts were even better as a result in season 2, I thought.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, it's, just getting it done, keeping it moving.
You mentioned craft before, when you were saying clarity, like what is the scene? What should the scene be? I think the more craft a person has. And, if they are analytical, it can be helpful to almost go through a checklist to not write like a robot, but, what's the Mike Nichols thing? Every scene is a negotiation, a seduction,
Fight.
or a fight. Yeah. I don't think that's always the truth. Sometimes it's just hilarious banter among friends, But if you have a scene that's a problem child and it just, studio just keeps wanting you to rewrite it again and again, and nobody's happy with it, it's got problems. That can be a good thing of going like, maybe it's just fat and boring. Maybe if I just turn it into a negotiation, a fight, or a seduction, maybe that will help, or
Yeah.
things like maybe some of the characters are just talking too long. Maybe I'm entering the scene at the wrong place and I should enter it a little further down, instead of being like, good morning. Well, good morning to you too. Full pot of coffee? Ya betcha. Maybe you get rid of all that shit and just enter deeper. What are some other like go-to craft things?
Or maybe just cut the scene. Consider cutting the scene. If you're
Yeah.
getting a lot of notes on a scene repeatedly, there's a good chance
Yeah.
you're hanging on to that scene because there's something about it. Like, oh, but I really like that one line the character says. It's such a
Yes.
funny line, or whatever. There might be something that's blinding you to like, oh, the scene doesn't fit. Just kill it.
I hate cutting scenes so much that even hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, you can't cut the scene. I'm like, oh, this is a theoretic. There's literally no scene. All I've got is the coffee pot banter. And I'm like, you're going to cut the coffee pot banter? How's the audience going to know if the coffee's fresh?
Yeah.
I hate cutting scenes. So stupid.
Yeah.
Editor's just going to cut them anyway.
Of you, me, and Drew, like I tend to be like, let's change everything, let's change it all, like every day, and you tend to be like, let's keep it all the same. And Drew sort of toggles back and forth. We're like the Hindu trinity of writing.
John Shiva the Destroyer. I have this really bad habit of, you're in the room, right? And people are throwing, everybody's really talented. Everybody's throwing up, the scene has to end with one, she looks him in the eye and she says something that just cuts him to the core. And people are throwing out their ideas and there are great lines all over the place. I had this terrible habit of trying to build scenes in such a way that I can stuff in as many of those lines as possible, which is, guess what a scene does not need? A scene does not actually need 3 or 4 mic drop moments. That's just insane, but I'll do them,
totally.
and the more I have those, the more I have like the mic drop, great line scenes where I build the scene around the line. Those things get cut to shit. They either get cut completely or the showrunner is like, I'll just take this, fix this by making it an actual scene.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, yeah, it's hard not to get, drawn in by shiny, like, oh my God, there's these 5 great moments that no one will ever see. And, I think Drew and we came up with this adage years ago of like, the quality of your finished movie or show is directly related to the quality of the scenes you're willing to kill to make it great. And, some of the best scenes we've ever written are on the cutting room floor or, were cut out of scripts. And,
that pains me. I know it shouldn't, but it does.
But that's part of what it needs. It's part of what it demands. Like to get the momentum, to get the spirit of the script right. Like, I don't know, just because a scene is great doesn't mean it fits. And when it doesn't fit, even if it's great, has to go. And just getting back to the resistance of it all, like knowing that a script in television is a constantly changing blueprint. It's like, I feel like scripts in television are just constantly changing. It's a new rewrite on a script every 5 days and just over and over and over and over. And sometimes it's hard to show up with fresh eyes, 10 drafts into it. And in those circumstances, it is worth just doing it, just getting in, and it trains you to be, like from 8 a.m. or from, sometimes 4 a.m. to 11 a.m. Like, I'm writing, there's nothing else. I'm just going to take it scene by scene and just go through and do the notes, try things, try 3 different versions of things. Sometimes I'd, do 30 versions of one scene just to try and get it right. Like there's a big speech and it has to be right. And I just do it over and over and over until it feels good. And
Yeah.
that
I
does
always
take
love that
time.
when a scene turns out really well and it flows effortlessly and people assume it's so organic, you just dashed it off, and actually you just churned it, you just cranked it. That's a very
Yeah.
satisfying feeling of going like, wow, sometimes you can just crank that shit out.
Yeah, and that's part of craft is you don't have to feel it to write it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's days when I'm like, tears in my eyes and I'm writing a scene and it feels so
Laughing.
good. And that doesn't actually mean it's going to be a better scene than the one I wrote when I was just grinding it out.
Grinding. Yeah.
There's times when I grind it out and I
Yeah.
compare the two scenes and it might even be better than the one I was totally emotional personally while
Yeah.
writing. And
It's nice to
um
have both. You wouldn't, as a writer,
yeah,
because you wouldn't want to live in either place forever. I have
yeah.
a trick I like. I like journaling. I mean, I journal anyway. I have for a zillion years. But sometimes just sitting down and a lot of times my journal entries are about the writing I'm about to do or the writing I'm procrastinating, and that's like, I cannot tell you how many journal entries I have that are like, I'm sitting at this new desk chair and I just don't like how it fits. And I think I'm going to move my table against the wall because I don't like being in the center of the room. I do a lot of that, but just a journal is like, no one's ever going to look at it. I'm not going to go back and look at my sixth grade journal. I have occasionally. It's pretty fun. But nobody's ever going to look at it. It's just for me. It's just how I feel. And so it can be kind of nice when your first 5 or 10 minutes of writing of the day is just how you feel. And then your fingers are moving and you're like, oh, this is easy. Right. I'm good at this. This is fine. I like words. I like writing. It's fun. And then you can slip into actually, your job.
That's great.
Big fan of that.
Yeah, one of my favorite tricks too is the private first draft. Like giving myself that, and this I learned really early on, like the idea of like, no, I'm gonna read it down and adjust things before I show this to anyone. Therefore, I can take risks, I can try things that don't work, and I'll read it later and I'll realize it doesn't work, But when I'm writing, I'm not playing offense and defense. I'm just playing offense. I can just like try things and wing it and try this and try that and then get to the end and then I go back and then I play defense and I read, and taking the defense out of the offense, I find for myself really, really helps. If I know I have, a pass of a script and nobody will see it but me. So if I write something that's really stupid, it's fine. I can take it out later. As opposed to feeling like everything I write, like people are going to read it and think like to
like
take
nobody's
that
gonna
voice.
read it.
Yeah. To take that voice out of my head. Like I found early on, that was the thing that freed me up at 22 when I was like, oh, I'm not showing this to anyone until I feel comfortable showing it to people. And that freed me in a way that I hadn't been before.
I have a thought about that because, John, I've noticed that you a lot of times do your initial writing right in Final Draft. You'll like open up Final Draft and you'll just start cranking, right? Whereas I wouldn't even, like opening up Final Draft is like like by then I have done so many voice memos. I've written so many notes to myself, so many docs. I have a piece of advice for people, and it took me 15 years to come up with this very simple piece of advice, or this very simple technique. If people are more like me and they prefer to have a lot of notes and a lot of ideas before they go to draft, I have learned to put it in one document. I'll have a new project and I'll call it Megadoc. Let's call it, Project X, Megadoc. And I'll put every single note, every idea, every voice memo in it. And sometimes I have one recently, I'm working on something where it's an 89-page Word document. That's a lot, but you can go in there and use the find function to look for the thing, as opposed to, I look at shit that I wrote 20 years ago. It's a disaster. I'll open up an idea and I will have 100 folders where it's got like one idea. How am I ever going to find that thing? And then if you are in the zone to procrastinate, if you are feeling like I'm not really focused, you can easily waste a day, 2 days, a week looking for that. Like, I remember I had one great line, or I remember I came up with a really fun character name. Where could it be? Where could it be? You can waste so much time digging around for that little crumb. Anyway,
Mhm.
Megadoc. I highly recommend it. If you got a new project and you don't want to go to final draft right away, just put it in this massive document.
Yeah. I personally find it, like, for myself, like you said, like I just get right into final draft, and I'll do brackets with like notes to myself, like, oh, I'm not sure what to do with this. And I'll just keep moving. I'll do the
Yeah.
fastest fast pass I can instead of trying to find the perfect line and wind my way to it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I just sort of riff, as fast and quick and dirty as I can. And then I have time to do it again and again. And like
Yeah.
by not overthinking it, it gives me the chance to do more passes.
Yeah. Well,
I feel like
what's the most? I'm not going to ask about television because that's its own separate thing with studios and networks and production notes and all that. What's the most final drafts you've done of a single movie script?
oh gosh, I'm sure there's one I read it so many times. I bet I've written 10,000 pages on that one to get 100 pages down, like maybe
Yeah.
more. And I easily have 100 plus versions of that.
Wow.
And it's still not ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of my, when I go back to over and over, I'm like, I know this is going to be great. That's just part of, that one is, I don't know, kind of like the thing I do for exercise. You know what I mean? Is I go
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
play with that, and, it taught me to rewrite it, it's been good. But yeah, anyway, tons. Like, and I love doing fast passes, lots of passes. And I
Right.
feel like that's
So
the
I've got a
best
Word
way.
document with 90 pages in it of just notes before I've opened up anything. And you skip that and you go to final draft, but you're potentially going to do 80, 90, 100 drafts of something,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sort of,
And yeah, totally. Like I like, I have more of an improvisational, repetitive style, and you tend to be a lot more thoughtful and focused ahead of you pre-think things, and I tend to like be like, I'll try a little this and a little that, and then
yeah. Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that over and over enough times and find the shape as it goes. And
You also
neither are
write,
right or wrong. Yeah.
yeah, correct. You also write with music. I write without music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like the writers I really admire and the people who can really churn it out fast too, people who write a lot and who write well, they tend to play music. You hear about
Yeah.
Shonda Rhimes with her headphones on, blasting music, or Stephen King cranking the rock and roll. And I'm like, I wish I could do that. But honestly, it's very rare. The only time I ever played music while writing was when I was copywriting for the internet. And I would play this like terrible, like massage, almost trance music. I put on my cap that I got from In-N-Out Burger, and I wrote thinking cap on it and marker. And I'd put it on, and the desk was and it was in the bedroom, right? So I'd get out of
I know,
bed,
it's so sad.
basically be like, I hate my life, brush my teeth, put on my thinking cap, put on my carpal tunnel gloves, sit at the desk at the foot of the bed, put on some sort of trancy, like meditation music, just so I could basically like disassociate and float above my body while I wrote. Emu oil chapstick, emu oil lip balms are as soothing as they are nourishing. Emu oil is the oiliest emu oil. Just all that keyword search engine optimization. Oh my God, I'm so glad I don't do that anymore.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
The things I used to do for $100 a day.
Yeah. So, and I love having music. Like, it keeps the energy flowing, and I'll sort of write a little and walk around a little and then write a little more. Like, I try to keep my energy high. I find that really helps me just keep going. And there's lots of ways to do it. But I think, so often that craft muscle, just, having that, section of the day that you don't do anything but write, keeps it so that you're actually doing the work and you're doing the writing, and it's easy. It's almost like working out. It's, it's very hard to find 20 minutes a day to work out, unless that's a priority and you create the space for it and you have a zone where you're gonna do it no matter what. And it's the same with writing.
Plan to fail.
Yeah. Actionable tip of the week. if you're getting stuck and you're having a hard time, talk to somebody you trust. If you're, doing this on your own, like, find a writer's group or someone you trust creatively enough to, talk script ideas or talk through scenes with. Stacy and I, like in our early days, would walk, miles a day just talking through script ideas. And
I love me a good walk and talk. I like it on screen. I like it in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. We do that all the time whenever we're stuck. And, or try gamifying it with like sand timers, or like I'll do this and then I can go do that.
Rewards. Yeah.
Rewards, like
times a day you do things. Most important question. Journaling.
Yeah.
Lots of delicious coffee.
Yeah, coffee. Yeah, I tend to lean on that too much. But yeah, if you like our show, please. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I just have one more, which is also choose your projects wisely too. Because, no matter how fast you do it, no matter how well you do it, writing does take time. And if you're, say, working on a spec script, whether it's a pilot or a film, if you're doing it right, you are going to be with it for a long time. So choose the projects wisely.
Yeah. And choose your partners wisely. If you can, like if you're working with people who demoralize you, it can be really hard. Part of the resistance is just pushing through that too. And, getting to the next job. If that's part of the problem, get to the next job, like just push through.
Sure.
So if you like our show, please consider taking a minute to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. And please tell a friend. That all really helps us find our audience. Thank you. We appreciate it. We're happy you're here.
So true.